There are swords that pierce armor, and then there are swords that pierce the imagination. What if I told you one blade came from outer space, another has stayed razor sharp for 2,500 years, and one is still stuck in stone? These aren't fantasy, they're real. Here are the top 10 most mysterious swords ever discovered, and we're starting with a dagger from the stars. Buried with the Boy King over 3,000 years ago, it looks like a simple ceremonial dagger. But when scientists scanned it with X-ray fluorescence, the truth hit like a meteor, because that's exactly what it was. King Tutankhamun's dagger wasn't made on Earth. It was forged from meteoritic iron, material that fell from the sky, containing over 10% nickel and trace amounts of cobalt. That's the unmistakable signature of iron from outer space, found in metallic meteorites that predate even our solar system. What makes this discovery so mind-blowing is its timing. The Bronze Age wasn't known for working with iron, because Earth's iron was locked in ores too difficult to smelt with ancient technology, which means this dagger isn't just a stunning artifact. It's evidence that ancient metalworkers were actively searching for fallen stars. These weren't just artisans, they were early cosmic hunters. Researchers discovered that the metal in Tutankhamun's blade matches extraterrestrial sources, and this wasn't an isolated case. Other artifacts from the same era, from Syria, Turkey, and China, also contain meteoritic fingerprints. This suggests an awareness, maybe even reverence, for this celestial metal that spanned entire civilizations. This wasn't a one-off, it was a pattern, and it implies a level of trade, communication, or parallel innovation that challenges everything we thought we knew about ancient metallurgy. French archaeometallurgist Albert Jambon tested dozens of ancient iron objects. His results were staggering. Every single piece, daggers, jewelry, and tools, was made from meteorites. Earth-based smelting didn't appear until centuries later, around 1200 BC. Until then, iron came from the sky. To the ancients, this would have made iron unimaginably valuable, worth 10 times more than gold. And Tutankhamun's dagger wasn't just rare, it was divine. A cosmic blade reserved for a king destined to become a god. Even more astonishing, Jambon's analysis showed the dagger's components came from at least 2 different meteorites. That means these weren't random finds. People were actively seeking, trading, and valuing these fallen fragments of space. Some believe its origins may have even inspired myths of weapons forged by gods or sent from heaven. Because how else do you explain a blade that fell from the stars? This wasn't just a dagger, it was a symbol of divine power, of mystery, of status beyond mortal reach. A weapon that broke every rule of its time. A dagger made from the stars, buried with a boy who became a god. In 1965, deep within an ancient tomb in China's Hubei province, archaeologists uncovered a sword that defied logic. Over 2,000 years, buried in damp conditions, yet not a single trace of rust, and it was still razor sharp. This was the sword of Goujian, one of the greatest treasures in Chinese history. A double-edged bronze jian, flawlessly preserved, as if time had simply refused to touch it. How? That's the question that has haunted historians and scientists alike. The sword was sealed in an airtight wooden scabbard, yes, but even that doesn't explain the metallurgical mastery. Tests revealed a unique alloy. High copper content made it flexible, while the edges were laced with tin, giving it incredible hardness. But the true secret? A chemical coating a rust-resistant layer containing sulfur and sulfide cuprum, forming a protective molecular barrier. This sword was engineered to survive time. The level of detail is astonishing. Black rhombic patterns run along both sides. The hilt is inlaid with turquoise and wrapped in silk. The pommel bears 11 concentric circles. And near the hilt, ancient script. King of Yue made this sword for his personal use. Historians believe it belonged to King Goujian of Yue, who reigned during the spring and autumn period. A warrior king, Goujian suffered defeat, endured captivity, and later returned to conquer his enemies. His sword reflects that legacy, resilience, precision, power. It is both weapon and witness. When tested by archaeologists, the blade easily cut through stacks of paper. Imagine that. Bronze, sharp enough after 2 millennia to slice effortlessly. This isn't just rare, it's unprecedented. And it's not just a weapon, it's a legend. In Chinese folklore, the Goujian is called the gentleman of weapons. Noble, elegant, feared. This sword was more than a tool of war. It was a symbol of kingly virtue, personal honor, and divine right to rule. How this technology existed so long ago still raises questions. The sulfur-based rust proofing was centuries ahead of known techniques. The metallurgy of the Chu and Wu states had clearly reached a peak of innovation and craftsmanship long before the rest of the world caught up. And when the sword was loaned to Singapore in 1994, tragedy struck. While being handled, a 7mm crack formed, sending shockwaves through China. The sword has never left the country again. Today, it rests in the Hubei Provincial Museum, still perfect, still deadly, and still defying time. A blade that whispers across centuries, untouched by rust, unbent by history. When archaeologists first uncovered Ulfberht swords, they thought they'd made a mistake. How could a medieval blade be made of such high-quality steel, almost entirely free of impurities? It didn't make sense. These weren't weapons from the Dark Ages. They looked more like something out of the Industrial Revolution. But they were real, stamped with the mysterious inscription, plus ULFBERHT+. Over 170 of these Viking swords have been found across Europe, dating between 800 and 1000 AD. What's remarkable isn't just their craftsmanship, it's their chemistry. The steel contains 3 times more carbon than typical swords from that time. The result? A blade that's stronger, lighter, and far more flexible. That level of quality requires forging temperatures over 1,600 degrees Celsius. And yet, there's no record of any European furnace at the time capable of reaching that heat. It's as if these swordsmiths were centuries ahead of their time, masters of a lost technique surrounded by mystery. Even more curious, many Ulfberht swords are forgeries. Some have misspellings or crude workmanship, suggesting that the name Ulfberht was actually a brand, a symbol of elite status. The real swords, made from nearly pure crucible steel, would have been incredibly rare and expensive. Only the wealthiest warriors, nobles, or kings could afford one. Some researchers believe the original Ulfberht swords were crafted in monastic forges near the Taunus Mountains in Germany, close to known lead deposits. Others suggest the techniques came from the East, perhaps from Persia or India, where Wootz steel was already in use. It's possible the Vikings traded for the knowledge or stole it during their vast raids. Modern blacksmiths have tried to recreate these swords. One, Richard Furrer, managed to do it, but only after weeks of intense labor. using carefully controlled techniques. He called it the most difficult forging task of his life. Now imagine trying that with 9th century tools. Even more astonishing, microscopic analysis revealed carbon nanotubes inside the metal, tiny structures that enhance strength and resilience. These were once considered modern nanotechnology, yet somehow they existed in swords made over 1,000 years ago. So who was Ulfberht? A man, a guild, a mythical blacksmith passed through legend? We may never know. But one thing is certain, these were not ordinary blades. They were elite weapons, perfectly engineered, wrapped in mystery, and 800 years ahead of their time. At just 19 years old, Tristan Dare forged something that looks like it belongs in a science fiction epic. But the Nebula sword is real, and its origin is older than Earth itself. Dare, a self-taught bladesmith from Idaho, crafted the Nebula using the Meteorite, one of the oldest known objects in our solar system. Estimated to be over 4.5 billion years old, it crashed into Earth more than 1 million years ago and was unearthed in Sweden in 1906. Today, fewer than 40 fragments are known to exist. Somehow, Tristan got his hands on one. Forging this sword was no ordinary process. The Meteorite contains iron crystals arranged in perfectly symmetrical octahedral patterns, patterns that usually vanish when exposed to high heat. But Dare developed a secret method to preserve them, locking in cosmic geometry that's rarely seen outside laboratory microscopes. The Nebula's beauty goes even further. He embedded opals into the blade to represent stars, added flowing patterns of black steel and nickel to mimic galactic waves, and inlaid 24-karat gold into the contours. The hilt, carved from 20,000-year-old mammoth ivory. Every element was chosen to represent a different piece of time: ancient Earth, distant galaxies, and the fragility of human legacy. Forged at temperatures nearing 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit, the sword embodies extreme craftsmanship. Even for veteran blacksmiths, such precision is daunting. But for a teenager to pull it off, that borders on the miraculous. Dare hasn't revealed the exact cost of the materials, but experts estimate it's in the thousands. The Nebula sword is expected to fetch a high price at auction. Yet Tristan says it's not just a product, it's a story, a future heirloom, a cosmic message passed from one generation to the next. What makes this sword even more special is the spirit behind it. It wasn't born of war or kingship, but of inspiration, curiosity, and art. While other legendary swords carry the weight of history, this one carries the weight of the stars. Tristan Dare represents a new age of smiths, visionaries who see steel not just as a tool, but as a canvas for storytelling. A 4.5 billion-year-old relic, reforged into a modern myth. The Nebula sword is not just forged from a meteorite, it's forged from wonder. Before bronze empires and iron armies, before recorded history carved names into stone, there were the blades of Arslantepe. Discovered in the 1980s at the Arslantepe mound in eastern Turkey, these weapons shattered everything we thought we knew about the origins of the sword. 9 swords and daggers were unearthed in an ancient mud brick palace, and they date back to around 3,300 BCE, making them the oldest swords ever discovered. That's nearly 5,000 years old, older than the pyramids, older than written language in most of the world. Made from arsenical copper, a primitive alloy of copper and arsenic, the blades were unlike anything archaeologists expected. They weren't crude tools or ceremonial decorations. They were functional weapons. Each blade measured between 45 to 60 centimeters in length, with defined grips, guards, and edges. In other words, these weren't daggers, these were swords. 3 of them were inlaid with silver, suggesting they belonged to someone of great status, possibly a chief, priest, or early ruler. These weren't just personal arms. They were statements of power, of control, of hierarchy in an early society. And they weren't buried randomly. These swords were deliberately placed inside the palace, possibly as a ritual offering or as part of a display of military authority. Their placement wasn't accidental. It was symbolic. What's remarkable is that they appear at a pivotal moment in human history. The transition from stone to metal, from tribe to city-state. Arslantepe is one of the earliest examples of urbanization, complete with organized administration, storage facilities, and a central palace. And at the center of that ancient world, swords. These weapons represent the beginning of something monumental. The age of metallurgy as a tool for warfare, identity, and political power. For centuries, historians believed swords didn't exist until around 1600 BCE. But the Arslantepe discovery pushed that timeline back by over 1,000 years. The sword's design, long, double-edged and symmetrical, set the template for thousands of years to come. They show that even at the dawn of civilization, humans understood the power of the blade, not just to conquer, but to command respect. Today, Arslantepe is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and those 9 ancient swords, they sit at the crossroads of myth and memory. They are the first, the prototypes of war, the original blades that spark the arms race of civilization. It was supposed to be a leisurely visit. In 2017, archaeology student Vittoria Dalla Melina was touring a quiet monastery on a Venetian island when something caught her eye. In a small museum, tucked among medieval relics, was a sword that didn't belong. It wasn't medieval, it was something much older. After months of research, metallurgical tests, and historical digging, her instincts were confirmed. The sword dated back 5,000 years to the early Bronze Age. It's one of the oldest swords ever discovered, and it had been sitting mislabeled in a monastery display case for over a century. The sword was made from arsenical copper, the same alloy found in the oldest known swords of Eastern Anatolia, what is now modern-day Turkey. Its shape and style matched the weapons of Arslantepe and Sivas, linking it directly to the birthplace of sword making. This wasn't a replica or a later interpretation. This was the real thing. So how did it end up in Venice? Records revealed the sword had been gifted to the monastery by an Armenian collector named Yervant Horasangian in the 19th century. It came from a site near Trabzon, on the Black Sea coast, and was donated to Father Leonzio Alishan, a poet, historian, and monk. Somehow, through the passage of time and clerical oversight, the sword was never properly studied. It ended up displayed as a medieval piece, forgotten by history. But this wasn't just a case of mistaken identity, it was a breakthrough. The sword's design, materials, and typology confirmed its origins as a product of the early Bronze Age, a near twin of the legendary Arslantepe blades. It also proved something else, that Bronze Age swords had spread across regions much earlier than previously believed. Eastern Anatolia wasn't just the birthplace of the sword, it was exporting its designs, its alloys, its craftsmanship across vast distances. The fact that it took a student on a casual visit to uncover the truth speaks volumes. How many other ancient relics lie mislabeled misjudged, and misfiled. Today, the sword is preserved, recognized, and studied with the reverence it deserves, but it almost vanished into obscurity. A 5,000-year-old relic, a sword that crossed time and continents, forgotten in a monastery, until one curious eye uncovered the truth. It doesn't look like any sword you've ever seen, with 3 branch-like protrusions extending from each side of its blade. Japan's 7-branched sword looks more like a tree made of iron than a weapon of war. But its story, it's pure legend. The sword, known as the Nanatsusaya no Tachi, dates back to the 4th century and was discovered at the Isonokami Shrine in Japan. It's not a battlefield weapon. The delicate iron branches, the refined central spine, and the ornate gold inlay all suggest this was ceremonial, possibly even considered magical by its makers. What truly sets this sword apart is the gold-inscribed message etched into its core. The translation reveals it was a diplomatic gift from the Crown Prince of Baekje, an ancient Korean kingdom, to the King of Wa, early Japan. The message speaks of longevity, divine power, and a bond intended to last generations. And yet, its meaning is debated to this day. Some Japanese historians interpret the inscription as a sign of subordination from Baekje. Others, particularly Korean scholars, argue the reverse, that it was Japan who received the gift as a lesser party. A third view sees it as a diplomatic exchange between equals, bound by mutual respect rather than hierarchy. This ambiguity has turned the 7-branched sword into more than an artifact. It's become a symbol of contested history, of cultural pride, and of ancient diplomacy wrapped in poetic language. Technologically, the sword is a marvel. Forged from wrought iron and folded repeatedly to increase durability, it required expert craftsmanship. Creating the branch-like extensions without cracking the blade took not just skill, but intention. These weren't meant for combat. They were made to impress, to project power through form, not function. Some interpret the branches as representing divine energy or spiritual protection. Others see them as emblems of status, like antlers on a stag, meant to dazzle and dominate in ceremony. Today, the original sword is held in sacred trust. Only a replica is displayed to the public. The real 7-branched sword is rarely seen, its preservation protected with the reverence of a holy relic. It is a sword that was never meant to cut flesh, only to cut through time. A diplomatic weapon, a mystery wrapped in iron and gold, and a blade whose message still divides historians 1,600 years later. In the hills of Tuscany, inside a circular chapel surrounded by legends, stands a stone, and in that stone, a sword. It's not a statue, not a symbol, it's real. A 12th century iron blade driven deep into solid rock, believed by many to be the inspiration behind the legend of King Arthur's Excalibur. But this is no British myth. This is the sword of San Galgano. Galgano Guidotti was once a knight, arrogant, violent, and drunk on power. But in 1180, something changed. According to legend, the archangel Michael appeared to him, revealing a divine path. Galgano, unimpressed, responded with disbelief. He declared that giving up his sword would be as impossible as splitting stone. So he tried, and the blade slid into the rock with impossible ease. That sword remains embedded in the stone to this day, housed inside the Monastery chapel. And remarkably, scientific testing has confirmed that both the sword and the surrounding stone do, in fact, date back to the 12th century. This isn't a clever forgery or modern stunt. It's an authentic relic, over 800 years old. Beneath the stone, radar scans revealed a cavity, an underground tomb that may contain the remains of San Galgano himself. His story isn't folklore alone. The church canonized him just 4 years after his death. Eyewitness accounts, legal testimony, and papal documentation all support his transformation from warrior to holy man. And the legend grows darker. In the chapel rests a second relic, a pair of mummified hands. They're believed to belong to an assassin sent to kill Galgano, disguised as a monk perhaps, but according to the tale, wolves, loyal to the saint, mauled the attacker. His hands were severed and preserved as a chilling warning. It's a tale where myth, religion, and tangible evidence intersect. Whether you see it as miracle or metaphor, the sword of San Galgano challenges our skepticism. It tells us that transformation is possible, that redemption can be more powerful than conquest. And unlike Arthur's sword, this one was never pulled from stone. It was put there to stay. A real sword, a real saint, a real story that feels too magical to be true. Yet somehow, it is. A weapon surrendered to peace. Driven not by force but by faith. For decades it was believed to be part of a Bronze Age celestial treasure. A disc representing the cosmos, buried with ceremonial swords and axes. The Nebra sky disc, discovered in Germany in 1999, was hailed as the world's oldest depiction of the stars. But now, everything's changed. Recent research has thrown the dating into chaos. What was once thought to be a 3,600-year-old Bronze Age artifact may actually be 1,000 years younger, placing it firmly in the Iron Age. And that changes everything we thought we knew about the swords buried alongside it. Originally, the Nebra sky disc was discovered during an illegal excavation, alongside Bronze Age-style swords, bracelets, and axes. These items were used to estimate its age, but further analysis revealed inconsistencies. The burial site may have been staged. The items might not have been deposited together at all. And the disc itself? Its motifs, sun, moon, stars, don't match typical Bronze Age iconography. Instead, they resemble celestial symbols more common during the Iron Age. Its construction too seems too advanced for the era it was originally dated to. The metalwork, the symmetry, the inlaid gold, they all point toward a later period. This discovery has cast doubt on the swords found with the disc. Are they authentic Bronze Age weapons? Iron Age copies? Or worse, modern plantings by looters trying to inflate the value of the find? Some researchers insist the swords are genuine, that the dating controversy doesn't change their historical importance. Others argue that the entire hoard may have been fabricated, pieced together from different time periods and locations to form a compelling but ultimately misleading story. The implications are huge. If the swords are Iron Age, they no longer belong to the narrative of ancient skywatchers, using weapons and artifacts to mark celestial cycles. Instead, they become relics of a later, more refined age, still important, but less revolutionary. What's certain is that the Nebra sky disc and its mysterious swords have become symbols of how fragile archaeological truth can be. When context is lost, even the most extraordinary artifacts become puzzles without answers. One celestial relic, a handful of enigmatic swords, and a revelation that changed the stars. Sometimes history isn't rewritten with facts, it's undone with questions. From meteorite daggers to swords that defy rust, we've explored blades that stretch the limits of history, science, and legend. These weren't just weapons. They were symbols of power, belief, craftsmanship, and the mysteries that still echo through time. Each sword tells a story not just of war, but of culture, identity, and the relentless human pursuit of the extraordinary. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Your curiosity fuels this journey into the past. There are countless more secrets buried in history, and we're just getting started. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more legendary deep dives every single week.